Okay, let's now proceed to the prevailing attitudes that we see around us and the behavior. There are there are generally the most common of them actually. So we only have three examples. The most common of them is of course the tragedy of the commons, and it is followed by the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and third would be the precautionary principle, of which is the principle that guides most decision-making processes in terms of environmental issues, not only here in the Philippines, but most especially in developed countries. Okay, the tragedy of the commons, as the name implies, is we have first to define what the commons is. No? The commons is actually, or basically all the resources that are free to everyone. This is the air, the water, anything that is wherein the public has free access to harvest, free access to graze, free access to collect, and so forth. Most of us believe that resources are easily replenished and abundant enough for everyone to enjoy. Because of that mindset, people tend to take as many as they can because of the thought or the idea that if they do not do that, someone else will. Let's take, for instance, this illustration of a farmer. A farmer whose property has a large meadow beside it, and that meadow is surrounded by adjacent farms belonging to other farmers. And it is that meadow where the cows of the farmers graze. And soon enough, the other farmers saying that this farmer is somehow profiting well from his cows grazing on a pasture that no one owns, and he sees this farmer enjoying his profit. The cows are getting healthier, and these farmers are decided to add more cows to his herd. The other farmer on the other side also felt the same need for him to follow suit. So just like the first farmer, the second farmer also wants to increase his herd, increase the number of his cows, and let all his cows graze on the same pasture that the first farmer is doing. And soon enough, the grass in the meadow ran out. Okay, that is because if we combine the collective thoughts of all the farmers, probably there will still be a third or a fourth farmer in the picture or in the story. The collective thoughts of all the farmers together will have an adverse effect on the resource that is in question. In this case, grass. Okay, everyone wants to take as much of what they can because of the thought that if they don't, someone else will. So they might as well take advantage of whatever grass they can gather. And many resources are suffering from this kind of mindset. Fishes in the sea, overfishing. Many countries with the same fishing area tends to overfish, tends to compete with the resource because of the thought if they don't do that, another country will. And as a result, the area becomes overfished and the population of the fish stock begin to decline such that it could no longer sustain all the countries around it. So the idea of the tragedy of the commons, so that means it has become tragic for the commons, is that it led to overexploitation and eventual degradation, mainly due to its open access nature. If I do not use this resource, someone else will, or a small amount used or pollute is not enough to matter anyway, it's a renewable resource. So it also applies to pollution. Okay, the second behavior is explained by the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It is a fundamental theory in psychology proposed by Abraham Maslow in 1943. It explains why poverty is a major contributing factor to many environmental problems today. If you observe the surroundings, which do you think is that part of the city that would have the greatest amount of garbage strewn around, you know, with people ignoring their presence? Of course, you will find it in impoverished areas, in the slums, or technically what they call squatters, but a more politically correct statement for that would be settlements, informal settlements of poor people. So why is it that their place is often strewn with garbage and people don't mind their presence? Okay, poverty and environmental degradation are intertwined in a vicious cycle where insufferable circumstances leave poor people with no choice but to engage in practices that have adverse impacts on the environment as they seek basic provisions to improve their quality of life. A degraded environment creates less opportunities, so poor people become more vulnerable in the process. Let's now look at how Maslow actually typifies or represents the situation at hand. So he created what is called the pyramid of needs of humans, in a society. Okay, everything begins at the bottom of the pyramid, wherein the foremost priority for humans is their physiological needs. They should have adequate, let's say, ventilation, uh, so clean water, source of clean water, food, shelter, places to sleep, clothing, and reproduction. So these physiological needs are so basic and are so essential and are so crucial for people that before they can proceed to other concerns or before they address other concerns, this physiological needs has to be met first. Okay, so for people who has financial ability to meet this, they tend since they are now satisfied with their physiological needs, their attention now goes beyond physiological needs, and that is where they begin to climb up the pyramid. So after attaining the physiological need, they are now craving for safety. So since they have amassed some amount of assets, they are now concerned for personal security. So they are now living in houses that are stronger and that are not easy to break in, employment, resources, health, and property. And that soon follows that if the safety needs are met, that is where they begin to seek a higher level for satisfaction, and that is love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, and sense of connection. That is now, it now becomes a higher form, and man tends to become altruistic. Unfortunately, for poor people, they are finding it hard to climb up the pyramid of needs because of their extreme impoverished state. They could just go slightly by to meet their physiological needs. So let's say if a rich person has reached self-actualization, esteem, that is where they begin to give more attention to the environment. And that's why you will see much of those who are advocates are not well, at least financially, a little bit financially well off compared to the poor people, wherein They are not really concerned first for the environment if their stomachs are growling with hunger, because that is their foremost concern, is to survive. So the environment is the least of their concerns, and that is uh, what those are among the problems, associated with environmental degradation today. The third one is the precautionary principle. This principle originated in the early 1970s from the German principle Vorsorge, of Vorsorge or foresight. Society should exert efforts to avoid environmental damage by careful forward planning. Okay, let's look at the illustration of two frogs who are um, immersed in a pan of water, and that pan is placed over a fire. And I think every one of you knows the consequences if they stayed long in that pan of water. Okay, the opinions of these two frogs differ from one another. Okay, for the frog who adheres to the precautionary principle, he believes that everyone in that situation, since they are aware that they are in a place where it is being heated up from below, that there is an impending danger, and we should go out until someone can prove or tell me that the water won't boil. So since no one is stepping forward with any proof or with any scientific explanation, it would be more cautious for us to step out first. So it is better that we prevent any untoward incidents by stepping out, rather than waiting for something to happen. On the other hand, the other frog doesn't agree or disagree. Okay, this time he is harping on what is called the burden of proof, wherein he said that I will only get out when you prove to me that uh, we will be boiled alive. So that means I am willing to take the risk, because I have probably invested some amount of time and resources, and that to tell me to get out is something I cannot risk doing, because I might lose my investment. So in this case, the frog opted to stay there because he is now enjoying the space in the pan, and unless you can prove that he will be boiled alive, he will not get out there. So he's relying on a burden of proof. Okay, so the precautionary principle is something that is taken by both sides. So for example, in climate change, climate change advocates believe that based on the precautionary principle, we should be cautious on introducing more carbon into the atmosphere by reducing our production or our consumption of fossil fuel. Although there is no scientific data sufficient enough to prove that the current activity on fossil fuel is the primary cause for climate change, and that the phenomenon is now becoming irreversible, global warming is now becoming irreversible, then let's not wait for that to happen. So as early as now, we go out, or we stop doing whatever we are doing now. On the other hand, those that do not believe in climate change is that we cannot follow you because we have already invested so much that stopping right now would be disastrous for the economy, unless you prove to me or you give proof that such thing will happen, that there will indeed be climate change that will be destructive enough to threaten our survival. Otherwise, if you don't present any proof, we will not stop doing whatever we are doing right now. Okay? So for them, they are being cautious. They are also applying the principle, the precautionary principle, being cautious. But our, our being cautious should be supported by evidence. Otherwise, we won't be cautious. Okay? So in environmental policy making, it is a strategy to address environmental issues with potential of harm while extensive scientific knowledge on the matter is still lacking. It emphasizes caution, pausing and reviewing before leaping into new innovations that may prove disastrous. And it is analogous to Benjamin Franklin's action that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and novelist Samuel Lover's idiom, better safe than sorry.